Dinosaurs, both predators and herbivores, became true giants, and their evolution was the result of a long journey that began in forests teeming with life and experimentation. Now imagine how many more mysteries the history of Earth holds, and how each epoch is connected to the one before it. 300 million years ago, our planet looked completely different from today. Imagine a world where giant horsetails reaching the height of a 10-story building filled the landscape, and centipedes as long as a baseball bat crawled through the marshes. Yes, during this time, in the Carboniferous and Permian periods, Earth was a true kingdom of giants. A humid and warm climate fostered the formation of vast marshy areas where amphibians the size of crocodiles roamed, and flying insects had a wingspan of more than a meter. These conditions created an ideal environment for the survival of unusual creatures that could not survive in today's world. For example, at this time, giant spiders the size of a dog hunted their prey with remarkable efficiency. But that's not all. Forests and marshes were crawling with centipedes that could reach more than a meter in length, and their multi-segmented bodies allowed them to quickly navigate difficult terrain. How did they survive? The secret was in the high concentration of oxygen, 35% compared to today's 21%, which allowed them to grow to such incredible sizes. Now imagine that on the same planet there were other amazing organisms, for instance, ancient trees that were not like modern ones, but rather resembled giant ferns, with thick trunks and wide leaves that could shade entire fields. These trees reached heights of up to 100 meters and played a key role in the ecosystem, creating ideal conditions for the life of many creatures. But that's not the strangest thing. In this period, the first reptiles, predecessors of dinosaurs, began to colonize new ecosystems. Do you know what's even more shocking? These early reptiles could be the size of a small person and were the predecessors of those giants that would soon dominate the planet. Moreover, during this time, there were massive geological changes. Continents shifted, mountain ranges formed, making life even more challenging for the creatures inhabiting this ecosystem. Each change in the landscape opened new opportunities for life, creating situations where some species survived while others went extinct. Over millions of years, the planet prepared for the arrival of dinosaurs, but before that it had to undergo incredible transformations. And do you know what's the craziest? Scientific research shows that it was during this time that conditions for future mass extinctions were formed, which would forever change the face of our planet. At the beginning of this period, Earth was a remarkable tropical world, covered in green carpets of leaves and mosses, where temperatures fluctuated within the range of 30 degrees Celsius, and humidity reached up to 90%. Imagine a planet without seasons, an eternal summer where rain and sun alternated, creating ideal conditions for life. Forests of giant ferns and conifers stretched for thousands of kilometers, reaching heights of 30 meters, with trunks so thick that several people could fit inside. Under these conditions, unique ecosystems thrived, from small lizards to enormous insects that could grow as large as a pigeon, with some reaching lengths of 30 centimeters. And the most astonishing part, these tropical forests were home to ancient amphibians that could move both on land and in water, with limbs resembling fins and sizes up to 1 meter. Additionally, there were swamps filled with green algae and giant insects that became easy prey for predators. These swamp ecosystems were true incubators for life, where every drop of water played a crucial role in supporting numerous species. And what is even more shocking, the entire ecosystem balance was maintained by a high level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which was twice as high as today's levels, creating a greenhouse effect that promoted rapid plant growth. A wall of mosses and lichens covered the trunks of trees, while the underbrush hid various small creatures that played their roles in the complex food chain. At this time, there were no large mammals on Earth, and the entire ecosystem was focused on the prosperity of reptiles and amphibians, which dominated these tropics. Millions of years of evolution led to the emergence of creatures that could adapt to such conditions, and some grew to sizes that we can only imagine. Throughout this epoch, life continued to evolve, adapting to constantly changing conditions and creating a world that was remarkably diverse and full of mysteries. The level of oxygen in the atmosphere reached 35% due to a process we now call photosynthesis. Plants, absorbing carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen, created ideal conditions for the flourishing of life. These tropical forests, filled with giant trees like Archaeopteris, which towered over 30 meters in height, became true factories for oxygen production. Thanks to extensive swamps and bodies of water where organic matter accumulated, conditions were created for the formation of coal seams, which in turn contributed to further increases in oxygen levels in the atmosphere. This was a time when life on Earth was teeming with diversity, and it seemed that each new generation of creatures became more perfect. Dragonflies with a wingspan of 75 centimeters could not only catch their prey but also hover in the air like modern birds, thanks to the high concentration of oxygen that supplied their respiratory system with the necessary amount of air. On land, giant millipedes, as long as a baseball bat, could easily navigate the forest, and their massive bodies were the result of the perfect combination of oxygen and favorable climatic conditions. But the most astonishing thing, at the peak of this oxygen explosion, there existed even crocodile-sized amphibians that hunted their smaller kin. The increase in oxygen not only promoted the growth of organisms, but also created conditions for the emergence of new life forms. For example, some plants developed hard bark and sharp thorns to protect themselves from herbivores, while others became even more toxic. This ecosystem was in constant motion, and each new generation of animals and plants tried to find its niche in this complex network. While there was twice as much oxygen as there is today, this meant that life was not only diverse, but also incredibly dynamic, with each creature in this world striving to survive and dominate. But what happened to this rich ecosystem when the oxygen level began to decline? Giant horsetails, known as lepidodendrons, dominated the forests of that era, reaching heights of 30 to 40 meters, with trunks up to 2 meters in diameter. Imagine these colossal plants piercing the sky, creating a sort of green wall where light barely penetrates through the foliage. Their trunks were covered in hard bark that protected them from pests and adverse environmental conditions. This basic protective mechanism was vital, as the dense forests were home not only to herbivores, but also to predatory amphibians that hunted anything that moved. Lepidodendrons possessed an extraordinary ability to photosynthesize due to their vast leaf area, allowing them to absorb a large amount of sunlight. Scientists have calculated that these plants could produce twice as much oxygen as modern trees, further underscoring their crucial role in the ecosystem. But these were not just trees. Their roots extended to depths of up to 4 meters, creating a powerful network that helped retain moisture in the soil. Thanks to this adaptation, they could survive in conditions where other plants failed. These giant plants not only provided oxygen to the surrounding environment, but also served as a shelter for numerous creatures, including insects and small animals that found protection in their dense canopies. And that's not all. Lepidodendrons reproduced using spores that, as evidence shows, were the size of a tennis ball, making them unique among other plants. This method of reproduction allowed them to quickly colonize new territories, filling gaps left by the extinction of other species. Over time, as oxygen levels declined, these giants began to lose their dominant position, giving way to smaller, more adaptable species. But here's the most incredible part. Some of these trees could live up to 1,000 years, making them true witnesses to the changes that occurred on Earth. The trunks of lepidodendrons were true giants of their time, reaching heights of up to 30 meters and diameters of up to 1 meter. Imagine this. Their surface was covered with characteristic rhombic scars, formed by fallen leaves. These scars, reminiscent of pruning marks, served not only as decoration, but also as indicators of the tree's health. The more scars, the more leaves it lost, indicating its age and life cycle. What is truly remarkable is that these scars could maintain their structure for hundreds of years, preserving information about the climatic conditions when the leaves fell. In rainy seasons, when humidity reached 90%, leaves created ideal conditions for the formation of these scars. It is important to note that the trunks of lepidodendrons did not have a clear bark, as modern trees do, but their surface was hard and textured, allowing them to effectively withstand strong winds. How did they survive in such conditions? Their unique anatomy was the key. Inside were vessels that could transport water to great heights, ensuring vital moisture even in the driest months. But that's not all. The trunks of lepidodendrons had the ability to regenerate, allowing them to restore damaged areas. Just imagine how they could recover after hurricanes or other disasters, regaining their majestic form. And now, imagine that on each such tree could live millions of microscopic organisms, finding shelter in these scars and cracks. These ancient ferns became homes for numerous creatures, including insects and small animals, which found protection in their dense canopies. And the most astonishing thing? Some of these trees could live up to 1,000 years, preserving their scars as a memory of the time when they dominated the forests filled with life. Imagine vast forests where colossal calamites grew up to 20 meters tall like bamboo, dominating their surroundings. These plants were not just tall, they had a unique stem structure consisting of hard segments that supported their mass, allowing them to reach such astronomical sizes. What made them so powerful? The answer lies in the peculiar climate of those times. The level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was twice as high as today's, providing plants with abundant nutrients for growth. But that's not all. Calamites had an incredibly efficient photosynthesis system, enabling them to absorb sunlight even in dense vegetation where light barely pierced through the leaves. What's even more astonishing? These plants could reproduce not only by seeds but also vegetatively, facilitating their widespread distribution. As a result, calamites formed entire forests where their height could reach the size of a 16-story building. Now imagine tiny creatures crawling among these giants, finding shelter in their dense canopies. It's intriguing that even large insects the size of a fist could survive and hunt smaller animals, trying to hide from predators. What's even more shocking? These calamites left behind powerful roots that formed entire ecosystems, holding the soil and preventing erosion. Their impact on the environment was immense as they contributed to the formation of coal, which later became the primary source of energy for humanity. But that's not all. Their stems contained special substances that protected them from pests, making them a home for numerous microorganisms and creating a unique ecosystem. These giants not only survived, they thrived, and their mysteries still await discovery. Tree-like ferns, such as Ceronius, with their peculiar roots, were true giants of their time. Imagine plants reaching heights of up to 20 meters, with leaves that could span 10 meters. These enormous feathery leaves not only adorned forests but also played a crucial role in the ecosystem. Their root systems were incredibly complex and extensive, penetrating the soil to depths of up to 2 meters. This allowed them to retain moisture and nutrients, which was vital in conditions where the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was twice as high as today. But what is even more astonishing? The roots of Ceronius formed intricate networks connecting plants to one another and creating a unified living space. This enabled them to share resources such as water and minerals, significantly increasing their chances of survival. Moreover, their roots not only sustained the life of the ferns but also provided habitat for numerous microorganisms and fungi that interacted with the root system. Around these plants, a true ecosystem was formed, where each creature played its role. It is fascinating that Ceronius could reproduce not only by seeds, but also vegetatively, making them even more resilient to environmental changes. Each new sprout could grow from the roots of an adult plant, ensuring the continuation of the species in conditions where other types were going extinct. And what is even more shocking, many researchers believe that it was these ferns that formed the soil capable of supporting the life of other plants. Thanks to their ability to photosynthesize, Ceronius produced vast amounts of oxygen, contributing to the development of other forms of life. And the most intriguing fact, their remains, after millions of years, became the basis for the formation of coal deposits, which are still a vital source of energy for humanity. These giants of the past left behind not only traces in geological history, but also entire ecosystems that continue to influence contemporary nature. Conifers, the ancestors of modern coniferous plants, began to dominate the forests that spread across the planet. These trees could grow up to 30 meters tall, and their crowns could span more than 20 meters. Imagine a forest where trees grew so densely that light barely pierced the canopy. Under their shade, the first mammals began to appear. But that's not the most amazing part. Conifers had unique seeds that developed in cones, not fruits, as in most modern plants. These cones could contain up to 100 seeds, which, thanks to their hard shells, could survive harsh conditions and spread over long distances. It's important to note that conifers were the foundation for the formation of ecosystems where not only plants but also a vast array of animals coexisted. Their needle-like leaves, by retaining moisture, created ideal conditions for the survival of various insects, such as ancient beetles and butterflies, which could thrive in hot climates. These trees also witnessed the appearance of the first mammals. Many of them sought shelter in the shade of conifers, exploring new horizons. Did you know that conifers could survive in the most diverse climatic conditions, from tropical to temperate zones? This allowed them to survive even when other plants went extinct. And now the most astonishing fact: some species of conifers could exist on Earth for more than 100 million years, making them some of the longest-lived plants in history. Imagine these trees witnessing the rise and fall of the dinosaurs. The secret to their survival lay in their ability to adapt to constantly changing environmental conditions. As the climate and ecosystems changed, conifers continued to evolve, giving rise to numerous new species. For example, their wood was so strong that it was used to build the first boats and buildings. This was not just wood, but a true discovery for early humans seeking materials for their survival. And what's even more astonishing, conifers formed the basis for the formation of coal deposits that we use today. Their remnants, surviving millions of years, provide us with energy and warmth, and are an essential part of our economy. Scientific research shows that conifers contributed to the carbon cycle, helping to regulate the level of carbon in the atmosphere. These trees not only created conditions for the survival of other creatures, but also actively influenced the climate of their time. Thus, thanks to conifers, vast forests were formed on Earth, which became homes for countless species. And what's even more astonishing, some of these forests could cover areas equal to modern countries, demonstrating their colossal impact on the planet's ecosystem. Amidst the colossal abundance of oxygen, reaching up to 35%, giant plants could grow to extraordinary sizes. It was as if one were breathing through an oxygen mask, each breath filling the lungs with something extraordinary. For instance, some tree species, such as Archaeopteris, could reach heights of up to 30 meters, comparable to a 10-story building. But it wasn't just the height. Their trunks could reach a diameter of 1 meter, similar to modern oaks. All this was possible due to the unique atmosphere where competition with pests was virtually eliminated. Imagine a world where insects and other pests couldn't exist in such quantities as today. This created ideal conditions for the development of giant life forms. For example, in forests composed of chordates and other tree-like plants, there were no insects capable of eating leaves, allowing them to grow not only in height but also in width. But this is not the most peculiar aspect. The secret to their survival lay in the fact that many modern pests did not yet exist. For instance, mosquitoes, which are a nuisance today, had not yet developed. This allowed plants not only to survive, but to thrive, as their leaves could reach widths of a meter. Their stems were covered with hard bark, protecting them from potential damage. But what is truly astonishing is that some of these plants could reproduce with spores the size of a tennis ball. These were not just small seeds, their size allowed them to spread over large distances, entering various ecosystems. And now comes the truly bizarre. Since there was twice as much oxygen as there is now, it allowed not only plants, but also animals to reach incredible sizes. For example, insects like dragonflies could grow to 75 centimeters in wingspan, larger than some modern birds. This created a unique ecosystem where giants not only survived but dominated. But do you know what's even more shocking? These giant plants also influenced the climate. Thanks to the high oxygen levels and vast forests, the planet's temperature remained stable, creating conditions for the survival of numerous other species. And what's even more astounding, these forests could absorb carbon in enormous quantities, contributing to the formation of coal deposits that we use today. Thus, plants not only created conditions for life, but also actively influenced the climate. Powerful root systems of these giants supported the soil, preventing erosion and retaining moisture. Imagine forests where each tree was as large as a modern bus, and under them, giant amphibians the size of crocodiles slithered. This was an ecosystem where everything was interconnected, and every detail played its role in sustaining life. Knowing this, what's even more remarkable? The high oxygen levels also facilitated the development of giant life forms that we can only see in science fiction films today. This was an era when nature created its own titans, and each of them was a part of a vast mechanism that supported life on Earth. The swamps of this era were true jungles, where humidity reached 90%, and dense vegetation was created not only by giant trees, but by a multitude of other life forms. Imagine that every second in this forest was filled with the sounds of sloshing feet of amphibians the size of crocodiles, hunting for insects with wingspans exceeding 75 centimeters. These forests were crisscrossed by a network of water bodies where schools of fish, resembling modern carps but up to a meter in length, swam. The complex root systems of plants not only supported them in a vertical position, but also created powerful ecosystems where every detail was significant, from moss-covering rocks to small insects crawling up tree trunks. But this is not the strangest part. Imagine that under this foliage were centipedes as long as a baseball bat, capable of instilling fear even in the bravest researchers. These creatures survived thanks to the richness of organic matter in the soil, saturated with decaying plant remains. Now imagine how this forest grew. The height of the trees reached 30 meters, and their trunks had diameters exceeding 1 meter. This was a place where life thrived, and every second could offer something new, from extraordinary life forms to unique interactions between species. No less astonishing is the fact that some of these swamp forests stretched over thousands of square kilometers, creating vast green oceans where life teemed and multiplied daily. In this world, harmony reigned, but beneath this idyll lay its own dangers. Poisonous plants capable of killing even large animals, and predatory creatures hunting them. Every step through this forest could be decisive, and it was here that the first forms of life emerged, which later transformed the face of the planet. Do you know that some of these forests were so dense that sunlight barely pierced the canopy, and under the cover of vegetation, twilight reigned? Imagine millions of years ago when dead plants like giant ferns and horsetails gradually sank into bogs, forming multi-layered deposits. These plants did not simply rot, they turned into peat, which over time, under pressure and temperature, began to transform. Did you know that this process can take up to 30 million years? This means that beneath you may lie millions of years of history frozen in the black layers of coal. When dead plants sank into a state of dormancy, their cells were filled with carbon, and over time, this carbon condensed to form coal. But that's not all. Each portion of coal contains various minerals that can tell us about the climate conditions of that era. For example, some coal seams contain traces of marine fossils, indicating that these places were once underwater. Now imagine how, over millions of years, peat bogs rich in oxygen became real factories for converting plant matter into coal. But how exactly did this happen? The secret lies in unique conditions: high humidity, lack of oxygen, and constant pressure created by new layers of vegetation accumulating above. As a result, seams formed that could reach a thickness of up to 100 meters. Isn't it amazing? In some places on the planet, coal formed with such intensity that its reserves became comparable to those of oil, meaning that beneath the Earth's surface lie gigantic riches waiting to be discovered. Each piece of fossilized coal can contain up to 77% carbon, making it an efficient source of energy. So all this mass, locked away in the Earth's depths, could become the key to humanity's energy future if we learn to use it properly. The process of coal formation from ancient plants was a true wonder of nature. Imagine dense forests where each tree was like a 30-story building, and the fauna consisted of giant insects and amphibians. These giant plants, including ferns and horsetails, fell to the ground and, over millions of years, did not decompose but instead created thick layers of vegetation. What is truly astonishing is that under the influence of pressure and high temperature resulting from the accumulation of new layers, plants transformed into coal. This process is known as coalification, and it requires not only time but also specific conditions, such as the absence of oxygen. How did this happen? Moist conditions facilitated the slow decomposition of vegetation, which then, under pressure, transformed into organic matter that eventually became coal. But this is not all. The coal deposits formed during this period can reach 30 billion tons in some regions, making them some of the most significant sources of fossil fuel on the planet. And what is truly remarkable, according to scientists' estimates, about 30% of all coal reserves on Earth were formed during this period. This means that this time was not just a historical epoch, but a true treasure trove of energy that we still use today. Moreover, the term Carboniferous period comes from the fact that during this time, enormous coal deposits accumulated, and it was this coal that became the main fossil fuel associated with this epoch. What else might be hidden in the depths of the Earth, waiting to be discovered? Giant dragonflies, known as Meganuridae, inhabited forests that were reminiscent of modern tropical jungles, but their sizes were truly colossal. The wingspan reached 70 centimeters. These predatory insects dominated the skies and, remarkably, could hunt small reptiles and even other insects, which were half their size. Their enormous transparent wings, like glass, allowed them to fly with incredible agility, making them true aerial predators of their time. But that's not all. Due to the high oxygen levels, which were 35%, their muscles could develop such power that they could soar into the sky with incredible speed, comparable to more modern predators. Meganuridae possessed a complex respiratory system that allowed them to obtain enough oxygen even during active flight. What's even more astonishing? Their eyes were the size of a ping-pong ball, providing exceptional vision and enabling them to spot prey at great distances. Imagine these giant dragonflies hunting in dense forests with trees up to 30 meters tall, using their sharp and strong jaws to tear apart their prey. Scientific research shows that such sizes and abilities were made possible by unique environmental conditions that had no parallels on Earth in later epochs. If you think that's all, you're greatly mistaken. Meganuridae could also reproduce, laying eggs in still water, where their larvae, reaching lengths of up to 30 centimeters, would consume anything that crossed their path. These larvae could remain underwater for several years, surviving in conditions where resource competition was minimal. And here's what's truly intriguing. Their extinction was linked to climate change and a decrease in oxygen levels, making the existence of such giants impossible. Will we ever see something like this again in the future? The centipede Arthropleura, reaching up to 2.5 meters in length, was a true giant of its time and the largest terrestrial arthropod in history. Imagine a creature the size of a small boat crawling through ancient forests. Its body could reach a width of 30 centimeters, allowing it to easily dominate other inhabitants of its time. But what is truly shocking is that its 68 legs provided incredible speed and agility, enabling this centipede to hunt its prey with remarkable efficiency. How could this have happened? The answer lies in the unique environmental conditions where oxygen levels reached 35%. This allowed Arthropleura to grow to gigantic sizes as their respiratory system received enough oxygen to support such colossal bodies. Did you know that their primary food source was dead plants and other decomposing organic matter? They actively used their powerful jaws to process plant material, playing a crucial role in the ecosystem of that time. But this is not the most unusual aspect. Living on land, Arthropleura were regularly attacked by predators such as early amphibians, which grew to the size of crocodiles. Picture these ancient giants and predators battling for survival. And here is where it gets truly bizarre. Despite their size, Arthropleura were vulnerable in their youth when they had just hatched from eggs. Their larvae, only a few centimeters long, could easily become prey for larger predators. This means that even the largest creatures had their own enemies. If you thought their size made them invulnerable, you will be surprised further. Research shows that the extinction of Arthropleura occurred due to a sudden change in climate and a decrease in oxygen levels in the atmosphere, making the existence of such giants impossible. But how did they manage to survive in such conditions? The answer lies in their ability to adapt to changing ecosystems, reminding us that survival is not just about size, but also about strategy. And what is truly intriguing is that scientists continue to search for traces of these remarkable creatures, and each new discovery opens up new horizons. It is astonishing, but the level of oxygen in the atmosphere reached 35%, which is twice the modern level of 21%. This state created ideal conditions for giant insects that could breathe with ease, a feat unattainable for their modern descendants. Imagine a dragonfly with a wingspan of 75 centimeters, larger than some birds. How could such giants exist? The secret lay in their respiratory system, which allowed them to extract maximum oxygen from the environment. This was possible due to the tracheal system, which allowed oxygen to directly reach the cells, bypassing the blood. Now imagine this in reality, flying over vast forests where trees reached 30 meters in height and the air was saturated with oxygen, like in the best resorts. But this is not the most peculiar thing. Research shows that some of these giants, such as the Meganeura, could reach sizes comparable to modern dolphins. Their powerful wings allowed them to hunt small vertebrates and other insects, creating true ecosystems where they were the dominant predators. It is interesting that in such conditions, even small insects could grow to sizes that seem incredible today. For example, ants the size of a fist could easily compete with birds for food. Do you know what is even more shocking? These giant insects not only survived but also reproduced efficiently due to the abundance of available oxygen. In such conditions, their offspring grew faster, reaching significant sizes in just a few weeks. This meant that the ecosystem was filled with a multitude of giant insects that filled the sky like modern flocks of sparrows. These conditions created a true army of winged predators. But it is important not to forget that with the increase in the number and diversity of insects came new threats. New predators were already appearing on the horizon which could threaten these giants. As a result of changes in ecosystems caused by climate fluctuations and changes in oxygen levels, some species began to disappear. And here is where things get really crazy. Scientists have found fossils that show that even at the height of their existence, these insects were under pressure from other species, creating incredible dynamics in nature. And do you know what is the craziest part? Some fossils show that at this time there were centipedes up to 2 meters long that could easily crawl through forests, leaving trails that scientists discover today. These ferocious creatures were true monsters of their time, and their sizes are breathtaking. How did they survive in a world full of giants? One theory suggests that they had the ability to camouflage, which allowed them to hide from predators, and that their hard exoskeleton protected them from attacks. Imagine giant cockroaches, known as Archimilocris, that could reach the size of a rat. These creatures survived due to extraordinary conditions that existed on Earth. Their bodies could grow up to 30 centimeters in length, making them formidable predators in their ecosystem. Scientists suggest that their powerful jaws could chew through vegetation, making them one of the few insect groups that could effectively compete with larger forms of life for resources. But that's not the most astonishing fact. Some findings show that these cockroaches could develop wings, allowing them to quickly move through dangerous forests. How did they hide from other predators? Archimilocris had a unique ability to camouflage. Their bodies blended with the surrounding vegetation and tree bark, allowing them to remain undetected while hunting their prey. Where did these giants come from? The answer lies in the high oxygen levels that reach 35%, enabling insects to grow to enormous sizes. And what's even more shocking, Archimilocris could inhabit various environments, from humid tropical forests to dry deserts, further emphasizing their adaptability. Their hard exoskeletons provided protection from predators and harsh weather conditions. At that time, there were no enemies that could match their size, and they dominated their habitat. Some scientists claim that these conditions allowed Archimilocris to survive the most severe climate changes, preserving their genes for millions of years. But how did they disappear? This mystery still puzzles researchers, as their fossils are found in many parts of the world, and each new specimen can reveal what life on Earth was like during that period. Scorpions like Pulmonoscorpius were true giants of their time, reaching lengths of up to 70 centimeters. Imagine them crawling along ancient shores where vegetation was so dense that light barely pierced the leaves. These creatures had powerful pincers that could easily tear apart their prey, and their predatory instincts made them one of the most dangerous inhabitants of their time. But what is even more fascinating is that Pulmonoscorpius were not just predators, but also true survivors in conditions where Earth was characterized by high temperatures and high humidity. They could breathe through special lungs, allowing them to adapt to various habitats, including flooded areas. Did you know that something even more amazing was discovered? Scientists found that their exoskeletons were so hard that they protected them from most predators. This allowed Pulmonoscorpius to dominate ecosystems where other species couldn't compete with them. While some other marine creatures sought refuge in coral reefs, Pulmonoscorpius boldly explored coastal zones, leaving tracks on soft soil. How did they deal with threats from other marine predators? The answer lies in their ability to be stealthy and react quickly to dangers. These scorpions could hide among seaweed and suddenly attack when their prey least expected it. Now imagine that Pulmonoscorpius could grow to sizes that seem fantastic today. Their length was comparable to the size of a modern soccer ball. But that's not all. Research shows that during that period, their population reached its peak, allowing them to occupy many niches in the ecosystem. Picture them hunting large crustaceans that were no match for them. And here's what's shocking. Some scientists suggest that these scorpions could have been the ancestors of modern spiders and crustaceans, making their evolutionary history even more intriguing. Have you ever thought about what modern ecosystems would look like if these giants had continued to exist? Their fossils are found in different parts of the world, and each new specimen provides insights into how they interacted with their environment. In some places, even traces of their hunts have been found, confirming their active lifestyle. Scorpions like Pulmonoscorpius were not just ancient creatures, they were key players in Earth's history, leaving an unforgettable mark on the evolution of life. Thus, during that period, there were no large vertebrate predators capable of controlling the size of arthropods. Why? The answer lies in the peculiarities of the ecosystem of that time. For instance, at that time, the land was covered with dense forests where giant plants, reaching heights of up to 30 meters, created ideal conditions for the life of countless insects and other arthropods. These ecosystems were so diverse that some insect species, such as dragonflies, could have wingspans of up to 75 centimeters. However, what is most astonishing is that this was the time of the flourishing of arthropods, whose sizes and diversity were unimaginable. While terrestrial ecosystems were constantly evolving, in aquatic ecosystems, the predecessors of modern sharks and bony fish already existed, but they did not have predators capable of competing with the giant arthropods. Scientists suggest that the absence of large vertebrates allowed arthropods to occupy the dominant niche. Have you ever wondered how everything might have changed if there had been predators capable of competing with them? These powerful predators, if they had existed, would likely have had sizes comparable to modern lions and tigers, but there were none. It is interesting that even in the oceans, where the first marine reptiles such as ichthyosaurs lived, there was no intense competition for food, allowing arthropods to continue their uncontrolled development. Powerful forest ecosystems were home to amphibians the size of crocodiles, but they could only watch the giant insects, which were not afraid of either height or size. Imagine, millions of insects fill the air, their wings casting shadows on the ground where the ancestors of modern lizards crawl, unable to create real competition. But that's not all. In some places, fossils of giant centipedes up to a meter long have been found. How is this possible? This size was a result of high oxygen levels, up to 35%, which allowed giant creatures to develop as never before. These conditions ensured incredible growth and survival, and, as a result, the absence of predators capable of controlling the size and number of arthropods created an ideal environment for their dominance. Each newly discovered specimen helps scientists understand how these giants could survive and dominate their ecosystems. The first amphibians were remarkable for their diversity and adaptability to environments that were vastly different from those of today. For instance, the Eriopsoids, which could grow up to a meter in length, had robust bodies and powerful limbs, allowing them to move easily both on land and in water. These creatures hunted invertebrates and small fish using their sharp teeth and agile movements. What is truly astonishing is that their skulls were equipped with special bone structures that enhanced their ability to perceive sounds, giving them an advantage during hunting. Meanwhile, the Diphylocavicids possessed a unique body shape. Their long and flat bodies, up to 1.5 meters in length, provided excellent maneuverability in water bodies. These amphibians, like true predators, could lie in wait for their prey, remaining almost invisible in the water. What is even more shocking is that they not only hunted in water, but also could venture onto land for reproduction, marking a significant step in evolution. Their eggs were protected by a hard shell, allowing their offspring to develop even in low humidity conditions. This means they expanded their habitats, colonizing new territories, and this was a crucial stage in the transition from aquatic to terrestrial ecosystems. Fossils of these creatures are found in locations where small ponds and marshy areas once existed, confirming their way of life. It is interesting to note that other amphibian species also existed at that time, but the Eriopsoids and Diphylocavicids were the predecessors of modern amphibians, demonstrating how evolution responded to changes in the surrounding environment. Throughout their existence, they adapted to various conditions, as evidenced by fossils found in different regions. These findings show that they could inhabit both fresh and salt water, greatly increasing their chances of survival. And just when you think you know everything about these amazing creatures, researchers continue to discover new species and fossils that challenge everything we thought we knew about early amphibians. For example, a new variety has recently been discovered that could reach lengths of up to 2 meters, and its characteristics are yet to be fully studied. Eogurinus, an amphibian that lived in those distant times, could reach a length of up to 4.5 meters, making it one of the largest representatives of its time. Imagine a creature the size of a small car, crawling along the damp banks of ancient rivers and swamps. This giant amphibian not only amazed with its size, but also possessed unique anatomical features that distinguished it from modern amphibians. Eogurinus had a powerful jaw filled with sharp teeth, allowing it to catch and hold prey, such as fish and other aquatic creatures. Its long and muscular body enabled it to move effectively both on land and in water. It was a true predator of its time. But what is truly astonishing, its limbs were adapted for movement on land but could also be used for swimming, making it a versatile hunter. Internal organs of Eogurinus indicated that it could breathe both air and oxygen dissolved in water, giving it a significant advantage in finding food and shelter. Did you know that something even more remarkable was discovered? Scientists found that its skin could secrete a mucus that helped protect it from harmful microorganisms and parasites. This means that Eogurinus was not only exceptionally adapted to its environment, but also had defense mechanisms that allowed it to survive in conditions of intense competition. As more fossils are studied, found in various corners of the world, it becomes clear that Eogurinus was not the only representative of its kind. Other large amphibians also hunted small animals during its time. However, Eogurinus became a symbol of an entire epoch when amphibians began actively colonizing new ecosystems. Its remains have been found in several regions, and each new specimen reveals new aspects of its biology and behavior. For example, the size of its skull reached 30 centimeters in length, indicating well-developed predatory skills. Additionally, the structure of its teeth suggests that it could hunt both fish and larger animals, underscoring its role in the ecosystem. But wait, there's more. Scientists continue to uncover new information about its lifestyle and habits, raising more questions than answers. Amphibians of this period were closely associated with bodies of water due to their unique reproductive characteristics. Their eggs required a moist environment for development. Imagine these ancient creatures searching for suitable places to lay their eggs to ensure the survival of their offspring. The eggs of amphibians were covered in a delicate membrane that could not protect them from drying out, making bodies of water true oases for reproduction. How did this happen? Males attracted females with their loud calls, which could be heard for many meters around, creating a symphony at the water's edge where they gathered. While some species preferred shallow waters, others sought deeper areas for laying eggs. Along the banks of rivers, where the water was warmer, these amphibians laid their eggs in dense stands of water plants and reeds to hide them from predators. Isn't it strange? In some cases, males stayed near the eggs, protecting them from potential threats. This behavior, reminiscent of the care shown by modern animals, surprises scientists with its evolutionary significance. And what about the offspring? The larvae hatching from the eggs resembled small water dragons living in marshes and bogs. They lacked limbs but had long tails that allowed them to move quickly in water. These larvae could reach lengths of up to 10 centimeters and fed on water plants, providing them with the energy needed for growth. But that's not all. Some species had the unique ability to metamorphose, transforming from water-dwelling larvae into terrestrial creatures. Imagine them leaving their water bodies, spreading their new limbs and climbing onto land to begin a new life. Remarkably, some of these amphibians could survive in quite harsh conditions, tolerating temperature and water level fluctuations. For instance, one species could enter a state of dormancy when water dried up, waiting for favorable conditions to return. This adaptation demonstrates how flexible these creatures were in their struggle for survival. And what if I tell you that some of their descendants still live in our water bodies today? These amazing creatures like frogs and salamanders continue to use the same strategies that their ancestors used millions of years ago. It seems that evolution has left its mark even in the modern world, opening new horizons for study. First reptiles began to appear on the scene as the climate started to change and conditions on the planet became more varied. Their appearance was a true revolution. These creatures no longer depended on water for reproduction, as amphibians did. Imagine that they could lay eggs on land, giving them the ability to colonize new territories without the need to return to water. Unlike their predecessors, reptiles developed a hard eggshell that protected the embryos from drying out, allowing them to successfully reproduce even in the most arid conditions. But that's not all. Their skin was covered in scales, which minimized water loss and allowed them to survive in hotter climates. What's even more astonishing? Their ability to regulate temperature. Reptiles could regulate their body temperature by basking in the sun or hiding in the shade, giving them a significant advantage over amphibians, which were more restricted in their movements. These new organisms began to dominate on land and in the air, blending with their surroundings. For example, the first lizards, such as diapsids, appeared at this time and became the ancestors of modern lizards and snakes. And did you know they could grow to the size of modern crocodiles? This opened up new hunting opportunities and allowed them to take down larger prey. Thus, reptiles became the predators of their time. It's interesting to note that their evolutionary advantages also included more efficient lungs, which provided better oxygenation, allowing them to maintain an active lifestyle and hunt at any time of day. Remarkably, these adaptations formed the basis for the further development of the diverse groups of reptiles that we know today. And what's even more fascinating, some of these early reptiles became the ancestors of dinosaurs, which later dominated the planet with their incredible sizes and diversity. Gillonymus, known as one of the oldest reptiles of its time, was the size of a small lizard, reaching a length of about 30 centimeters. This reptile had characteristic features such as an elongated body and a long tail, which allowed it to move agilely through dense forests filled with greenery and tall plants. Imagine Gillonymus crawling on the ground, searching for insects, of which there were many due to the high level of oxygen in the atmosphere. Its lungs were adapted for efficient oxygen uptake, enabling it to be an active hunter even in hot conditions. An amazing fact, in its diet, Gillonymus included not only insects but also small invertebrates, making it a versatile predator. But that's not the most fascinating part. Gillonymus was covered in hard scales that protected it from predators, and its sharp teeth were perfect for catching slippery prey. What's even more astonishing, these reptiles could survive in conditions where temperature fluctuated and the climate became less stable. Their adaptability ensured their survival when many other species went extinct. Gillonymus played a crucial role in the chain of evolution, paving the way for larger and more diverse reptiles. It's interesting to note that its closest descendants in the future became the basis for the development of dinosaurs, which later dominated the planet. But what's truly captivating, Gillonymus was not the only representative of its kind. Archaeologists have found the remains of several other species that were even smaller and more specialized in their habits. These small reptiles offer a window into the ancient ecosystems where each individual played its role in maintaining balance. And here's what might surprise you. Some research suggests that it was precisely such small reptiles that could have become the precursors of larger forms of life that we know today. Consider this. How could small creatures like Gillonymus have influenced the evolution of giants like Tyrannosaurus rex? The appearance of the amniotic egg was a true revolution for reptiles, opening the doors to the conquest of land. This egg, surrounded by a strong shell, allowed embryos to develop outside of water, significantly increasing their chances of survival. Imagine this. While amphibians were limited in their spread due to their offspring's requirement for a water environment, reptiles could colonize new territories. This meant they could fill ecosystems that were previously inaccessible. What is truly remarkable is that amniotic eggs contained special membranes that prevented water loss, which was critically important for life on land. In fact, these eggs represented a complex suite of adaptations. For instance, their internal structure provided embryos with necessary nutrients and oxygen while protecting them from external conditions. Some researchers claim that the size of these eggs could reach up to 30 centimeters in length, colossal dimensions for the time. This allowed hatchlings to emerge already sufficiently developed for life on land. And what is even more astonishing is that it was precisely due to amniotic eggs that reptiles were able to occupy ecological niches that were previously unavailable. Scientific research shows that amniotic eggs began to appear at least by the end of the Devonian period, with their diversity increasing with each new geological epoch. During this time, reptiles like diapsids became increasingly diverse and specialized. Some species even developed spines and hard shells for protection against predators, allowing them to survive in harsh conditions. What is even more shocking, some of these early reptiles could grow to sizes comparable to modern-day lizards, reaching lengths of up to 2 meters. The global ecosystem began to change rapidly. As they filled forests and plains, reptiles became the dominant predators, hunting smaller creatures and even their own kind in the struggle for survival. This evolutionary race led to the emergence of numerous new species adapted to the most varied conditions. Some reptiles began to develop unique hunting and defense strategies, further strengthening their dominance. For example, some early crocodile-like reptiles began to use bodies of water as hunting grounds, while others developed the ability to move quickly across land. This is not just a story about reptiles, it is a story about how life on Earth changed and adapted to new conditions. Each new discovery in this field underscores how complex and multifaceted this time was. And what might surprise you? Some scientists believe that the appearance of the amniotic egg was the catalyst for further evolution, leading to the emergence of such giants as dinosaurs, which later dominated the planet. Pelycosaurs, often referred to as the ancestors of mammals, became one of the most intriguing groups of reptiles of their time, thanks to their distinctive sails on their backs. These unique structures, reaching heights of up to 30 centimeters, served not only for thermoregulation but also, possibly, for attracting mates. Imagine a pelycosaur the size of a small bus, slowly moving through ancient forests where each tree could have been twice as tall as a modern 8-story building. These creatures could reach lengths of up to 4 meters and weigh around 120 kilograms, making them formidable predators or herbivores, depending on the species. Their powerful jaws were equipped with teeth resembling needles, allowing them to effectively capture food, such as soft leaves and other plant materials. But that's not the most unusual thing. Pelycosaurs were not the only creatures with such anatomy. Their relatives, such as dromaeosaurs, had a completely different strategy for survival, hunting smaller animals. How did it happen that some species evolved into giants while others remained miniature predators? The secret lies in the diversity of climatic conditions and resources available at the time. Pelycosaurs also had a unique feature. Their limbs were positioned under their body, like in modern mammals, allowing them to move faster and more efficiently. This was a true revolution in movement for reptiles. And here's what's even more astonishing. Some fossil finds indicate that pelycosaurs could reproduce using eggs that were significantly more protected than those of their ancestors. Their eggs could reach the size of a mandarin orange, and the thickness of the shell allowed them to withstand external threats. Research shows that this approach to reproduction could have been one of the factors contributing to their survival in changing climates. But the most incredible thing is that pelycosaurs managed to survive in conditions where the oxygen level in the atmosphere was higher than it is now, reaching up to 35%, allowing them to grow and develop to incredible sizes. Dimetrodon, the majestic predator of its time, was a true giant among the first land-dwelling creatures. Its length reached 4 meters, and its powerful jaws could tear flesh like a knife through butter. But what was most remarkable about it was its enormous sail on its back, which could reach a height of up to 1 meter. This sail, it is believed, was used for thermoregulation, helping the Dimetrodon retain heat while hunting its prey. Who were its victims? Ancient amphibians and small reptiles that couldn't withstand such power. But the Dimetrodon was not the only predator in its habitat. Competitors like Euagnathosaurs also hunted the same prey. However, the Dimetrodon stood out due to its unique adaptability. Its teeth were not just sharp, they had a unique shape that allowed it to efficiently tear meat, leaving no chance for its prey. Studies show that the Dimetrodon could reach speeds of up to 20 kilometers per hour, making it one of the fastest predators of its time. But what is most intriguing is that despite its size and strength, the Dimetrodon was not an ancestor of dinosaurs. It belonged to a group known as synapsids, which would eventually give rise to all mammals. So when we think of the Dimetrodon, we are looking at the ancestors of modern mammals, which once dominated the planet. Fossil remains show that it lived in conditions where the climate was significantly warmer than today's, allowing it to hunt a diverse range of prey. But what is even more astonishing is that its survival depended on its ability to adapt to changes in its environment. How did it manage to remain at the top of the food chain in the face of intense competition? According to the latest data, the Dimetrodon could survive in conditions where the oxygen levels in the atmosphere were higher than today's, allowing it to develop and hunt with incredible efficiency. The climate began to change sharply as a new era approached, and this transformation affected all living things. Temperatures gradually decreased, and the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere also began to fall, leading to changes in ecosystems. Imagine that forests composed of giant ferns and conifers began to give way to more diverse flora that could adapt to the new conditions. These were not just changes, but a true evolution where some species survived while others became extinct. For instance, during this time, the first seed plants appeared, which began to dominate the ecosystem due to their ability to reproduce in harsher conditions. But this was not all. As the climate changed, vast deserts began to form on the planet, occupying territories that were once covered in green forests. These changes created ideal conditions for new forms of life, but also led to the extinction of many known species. Did you know that at this time, the first reptiles appeared on Earth, which became the ancestors of all modern lizards and snakes? Their appearance was made possible by adaptations to a drier climate. But what happens with the climate next? It is expected that by the end of this transitional period, temperatures will continue to fluctuate, and this will be the cause of the largest mass extinction in Earth's history. You won't believe it, but around 95% of all living species will become extinct as a result of these changes. And the most shocking thing? This extinction will create space for new forms of life that will dominate the planet in the next period. The climate of the planet began to change at an inexorable pace, marking the start of a true trial for flora and fauna. Imagine a scenario where the temperature dropped by 10 degrees Celsius and the humidity levels plummeted, transforming once verdant forests into semi-desert landscapes. This process persisted for approximately 7 million years, resulting in the emergence of new ecosystems teeming with plants capable of surviving in arid conditions. However, this was not the end of the story. With each passing year, the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere decreased, leading to a reduction in photosynthetic activity. Do you know what this means? It meant that plants were experiencing a shortage of oxygen, which in turn led to the extinction of many species. Picture the scene: paleobotanists scouring the remnants of green plants, discovering that vast forests were replaced by shrubs and grasses that had adapted to the new conditions. But this was not the strangest part. At this time, the first amphibians began to thrive on Earth, migrating over long distances in search of water, leading to a struggle for survival. These creatures altered their habits and lifestyle to adapt to conditions where water bodies dried up and rivers became narrow streams. Do you know what is even more astonishing? Some species even learned to hide from the heat by burrowing into the sand, leaving behind only traces of their existence. Concurrently, the seas and oceans were also undergoing changes. The sea level dropped by several dozen meters, creating new land masses and isolating certain marine species. This led to the independent evolution of marine ecosystems, which in the future would give rise to new species. It is worth noting that during this period, the first ancestors of mammals began to emerge on Earth, exploring new niches vacated by extinct species. And do you know what is the most extraordinary part? These mammals became the foundation for all the modern mammals we know today. Climatic changes have led to the transformation of the planet's flora, which once dominated the planet, into something unrecognizable. Imagine forests where trees reach 30 meters in height, with trunks as thick as a modern passenger car. These giants, which were ferns and conifers, began to give way to more adapted species as the climate became drier and more variable. What's even more astonishing? The percentage of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere rose to 10%, creating a greenhouse effect and leading to rapid warming. This meant that tropical forests, which once covered vast areas, began to shrink, giving way to open spaces and steppes. And here's where it gets truly bizarre. Due to changes in ecosystems, plants began to develop new survival mechanisms. For example, some conifer species formed hard needles to minimize water loss, while others adapted to higher temperatures by producing resins that protected them from insects. But how could such giants survive in these new conditions? The secret lay in the ability of some plants to form symbiotic relationships with fungi, allowing them to obtain water and nutrients from deeper layers of soil. This cooperation between plants and fungi became the basis for the formation of new ecosystems that adapted to increasingly unpredictable climates. What's truly amazing? These changes in vegetation affected the fauna. Animals that once relied on dense forests began to migrate in search of food and shelter. With each step, they became more dependent on new plant species, which in turn changed their survival strategies. For instance, the earliest ancestors of dinosaurs began to hunt small mammals and reptiles that found refuge in the remaining fragments of forests. As a result, ecosystems became more complex and interconnected, paving the way for future giants that would soon dominate the planet. But that's not all. It was during this period that carbonates began to form, which later became the basis for the formation of coal, changing the course of the planet's history. Imagine a world where giant horsetails and ferns reaching heights of 30 meters were the dominant plants. But what led to their decline? When global changes began, oxygen levels started to drop, acting as an oxygen mask for these giant trees. Picture this. Oxygen levels fell to 21%, down from 35%. This made it harder for plants to breathe and caused a shortage of resources for growth. But that's not all. During this time, the climate became drier, and many plant species couldn't adapt to the new condition. For instance, familiar horsetails that once thrived in wet areas began to disappear as water receded, leaving them without the necessary conditions for life. What's even more shocking? They had to compete with new species that grew faster and could survive in more challenging conditions. Thus, annual grasses and shrubs began to fill the gaps left by the disappearing giants. But that's not all. Volcanic activity also increased, releasing carbon dioxide and other gases into the atmosphere, altering temperature and climate. Scientific research shows that several major volcanic eruptions, such as the Siberian eruption, contributed to mass extinctions. The giant horsetails, which could have survived in humid climates, couldn't adapt to the new conditions. They were too slow to react to such rapid changes, and here's where things get really wild. The emergence of the first mammals, which began to occupy niches previously held by large reptiles and plants. These small creatures, about the size of a cat, started hunting seeds and small insects, leaving the giants behind. Moreover, it was during this period that complex evolutionary relationships between plants and animals formed, leading to new forms of life. And the craziest part? Some of these new animal species even began to develop mutually beneficial relationships with smaller plants, which ultimately sealed the fate of the giant horsetails and ferns. The appearance of the first true conifers was a true revolution in the world of plant life. Imagine forests where not only giant ferns and club mosses reigned, but also tall trees capable of reaching heights of up to 30 meters. These conifers, such as araucarias and cellulose trees, began to actively populate the ecosystem, providing a new habitat for numerous living beings. And the most incredible thing, their seeds, the size of a pea, could be carried over long distances by light cones, allowing conifers to colonize new territories where there were no trees before. Due to the unique structure of their bark, which was hard and protected them from pests and diseases, these trees could survive in various climatic conditions. And what is even more astonishing, the high content of resin in their wood not only protected them from insects, but also became the basis for the emergence of the first ecosystems where plants and animals coexisted, forming complex interrelationships. These coniferous trees became home to early mammals, such as small mammals, which found protection from predators in their dense crowns. Coniferous forests not only provided shelter, but also served as a source of food. Cones and young shoots attracted various herbivores, which in turn contributed to the development of new species. In these forests, there were even the first ancestors of birds, which began to adapt to life among coniferous trees, developing unique abilities for flight and hunting. It is interesting that it was at this time that the first relationships between plants and pollinators were formed, opening new horizons for evolution. And what is even more amazing, in some regions, coniferous trees formed entire masses where their roots intertwined, creating underground networks that helped them share nutrients, forming a real forest cooperative. These dwarves not only changed the appearance of the planet, but also became the basis for the future ecosystems that we know today. And this is just the beginning of amazing discoveries about how coniferous trees changed our planet. Seed plants began to actively develop in conditions where humidity was rapidly decreasing and the climate was becoming drier. These plants adapted to the new conditions thanks to their ability to produce seeds, which gave them a significant advantage over spore-producing plants. For instance, seeds provided protection for the embryo by creating a special shell that could withstand unfavorable conditions such as heat or drought. Imagine a seed waiting for rain, storing all the necessary life within itself until favorable conditions for germination arrive. During this time, plants like conifers evolved to produce cones that protected seeds from adverse factors. These cones, acting like natural safes, provided not only protection but also facilitated the spread of seeds over long distances when they fell from trees. What is even more intriguing is that some species, like ginkgo, survived even after mass extinctions, preserving their seeds that could germinate after decades or even centuries. While many spore-producing plants went extinct, seed plants became increasingly diverse and adaptable. Their root systems delved deep in search of water, allowing them to survive in conditions where other plants could not. These roots, sometimes reaching several meters in length, provided stability and access to nutrients, and also strengthened the soil, preventing erosion. What is even more astonishing, some seed plants developed mechanisms to use sunlight more efficiently, allowing them to compete with other species for resources. For example, the leaves of conifers transformed into needles, reducing water loss and enabling them to survive in dry climates. They could store water in their tissues like living reservoirs. Thus, seed plants not only adapted to new conditions, but became true masters of survival in the most challenging climatic conditions, and this is just part of their extraordinary story. The secret to their success lay in their ability to evolve rapidly and adapt on a micro scale, allowing them to occupy new niches in ecosystems that were just beginning to form. At this time, the oxygen level began to drop sharply, reaching only 21%. This change led to a true catastrophe for large insects, which had previously reached sizes comparable to modern birds. For example, dragonflies the size of cats with wingspans of up to 75 centimeters began to disappear. Their respiratory system, previously adapted to high oxygen levels, could not cope with the new conditions. Imagine these giants, once dominant in the skies, now becoming victims of their own changes, but this is not the most astonishing part. The decrease in oxygen led to insects evolving into smaller forms to survive, and each new adaptation was a response to the threatening conditions. For instance, some began to develop more efficient breathing methods, allowing them to use less oxygen. It is known that some species survived by using specialized structures on their tracheas that increased the surface area for gas exchange. This meant that even with low oxygen levels they could continue to exist. But what is even more shocking? At this time, there was a real struggle for survival. Insects adapted not only in size but also in behavior. They began to form swarms which allowed them to hunt and defend themselves from predators more effectively. Meanwhile, the vegetation around them also underwent changes, and many species became more toxic to protect themselves from being eaten. These changes in the ecosystem created conditions where only the most resilient survived. As a result, in the insect world, a true revolution occurred, where the sizes and forms of these creatures changed forever. If you could have seen this time, you would have noticed how insects, once giants, became miniature, and their new forms allowed them to adapt to completely different conditions. And the most incredible thing? These changes created conditions for the appearance of entirely new groups of insects that could have become the ancestors of modern species. In the dark forests filled with dense thickets lived the therapsids, the ancestors of mammals, resembling a mix of reptiles and modern mammals. These creatures, reaching lengths of up to 3 meters, possessed an extraordinary ability. Their jaws were more mobile than those of their ancestors, allowing them to chew food more effectively. But what is truly astonishing? Some therapsids, like the Dimetrodon, had enormous crests on their backs, reaching heights of up to 1 meter. These crests were likely used for thermoregulation and to display strength in territorial disputes. But that's not all. While most other animals crawled or moved quickly, therapsids evolved more advanced limbs, enabling them to move more agilely and efficiently on land. Imagine them running as fast as modern mammals, despite their size. Their unique jaw anatomy allowed them to hunt not only invertebrates but also larger animals, making them dominant predators of their time. Some researchers claimed that therapsids could live up to 100 years, which was exceptional for animals of that time. And consider this, they were already developing the first hairs. These small but significant evolutionary changes helped them better adapt to changing environmental conditions. Picture this. As their sizes and forms changed, their blood already contained precursors to warm-bloodedness. How could they survive in conditions where the climate was gradually becoming harsher? The answer lies in their ability to develop new hunting and survival strategies, utilizing the opportunities of their surroundings. But what is truly remarkable, it was the therapsids who laid the foundation for the evolution of mammals that would populate our planet millions of years later. It's important to remember that some of them even began to develop complex social structures that foreshadowed the behavior of modern mammals. For example, some, like the synapsids, could form groups for joint food search and protection from predators. These social bonds became the basis for the interactions we observe in mammals today. And did you know that some therapsids had teeth resembling modern incisors and canines, indicating a complex food chain that existed at that time? Gorgonops were true monsters of their time and the first saber-toothed predators in Earth's history. These creatures, measuring up to 2 meters in length, had teeth that resembled modern sabers, reaching up to 12 centimeters in length. Imagine them hunting their prey, using their powerful jaws and razor-sharp teeth to tear flesh. But that's not all. Gorgonops had unique anatomy that allowed them to develop incredible speed, making them formidable predators for other animals of the time. Their bodies were covered in tough skin, like modern reptiles, providing protection from attacks by larger predators. Did you know that Gorgonops could survive in the most diverse conditions, including arid regions and tropical rainforests? This was possible due to their ability to adapt to changes in climate and their environment. Interestingly, some species of Gorgonops had distinctive features such as long limbs, which allowed them to develop excellent running skills. Now imagine their ecosystems also hosted other predators like dromaeosaurs, competing with them for resources. But what's truly intriguing is that Gorgonops were not just predators, but also crucial components of the ecosystem, influencing the populations of other species. Their extinction was one of the most significant events in Earth's history, and what's remarkable is that many of their traits were inherited by later mammals, making them predecessors of modern predators. And now, the most astonishing fact: some Gorgonops had such powerful jaws that they could crush the bones of their prey, indicating their dominant role in the food chain of their time. While predators dominated the ecosystems, herbivorous reptiles like pariasaurs emerged, fundamentally altering the rules of the game. These giants of their time could reach lengths of up to 4 meters and weigh up to 100 kilograms. Imagine them slowly moving through ancient landscapes with their powerful bodies and thick, leathery armor that protected them from attacks. What is truly intriguing is that despite their size and protective mechanisms, pariasaurs were not only survivors, but also the first herbivorous reptiles to adapt to a new environment where vegetation became increasingly diverse. Their teeth, reminiscent of modern tusks, allowed them to easily consume tough vegetation, including early ferns and conifers. But that's not the strangest part. Their bodies were covered in sharp spines that served not only for protection, but also for thermoregulation. In the hot climate, they had to find ways to cool down, and the spines helped them do so by allowing air to pass through their skin. What's even more astonishing, pariasaurs were not the only herbivores. They coexisted with other reptiles, such as the predatory therizinosaurs, which tried to hunt them. This complex ecosystem, where predators and herbivores constantly interacted, created a unique balance. It's worth noting that pariasaurs began to evolve into different subspecies, adapting to various living conditions, which led to the appearance of new life forms. Their impact on the ecosystem was significant. They facilitated the spread of seeds, which in turn contributed to the development of vegetation. And here's where it gets really mind-boggling. Despite being herbivores, their size and strength allowed them to defend themselves against predators, changing the rules of hunting and survival at the time. It has been proven that they could survive in conditions of limited food thanks to their ability to digest complex carbohydrates. Ultimately, these herbivorous reptiles not only survived but also left their mark on evolution, becoming predecessors of future mammals. Now imagine that their closest descendants will dominate the Earth in millions of years. But how did this happen? Supercontinent Pangaea began to form due to tectonic processes that occurred over millions of years, and as a result of its formation, the climate on Earth underwent significant changes. Imagine a vast continent stretching over 30 million square kilometers, an area that nearly covered all the oceans and seas, leaving only small internal bodies of water. On such a massive landmass, the climate became more continental. Temperatures in the center of the continent fluctuated from -40 to +50 degrees Celsius. What do you think were the consequences of such a stark temperature contrast? Unlike the more moderate climate that existed previously, the new climate led to the formation of vast deserts stretching for thousands of kilometers, where rain fell extremely rarely, only a few times a year. This meant that the flora and fauna that managed to survive had to adapt to extreme conditions. Plants developed deep roots to extract water, and animals became more mobile to find food. But that's not all. Ocean currents also changed, affecting the distribution of heat across the planet. In northern regions, for example, the temperature of the water significantly decreased, causing changes in the ecosystems that inhabited these waters. You won't believe it, but it was during this time that the mass extinction of species began, the most extensive in Earth's history. Around 95% of all marine species disappeared, largely due to changes in climate and oxygen levels in the water. And here's where it gets really incredible. While animals on land were barely coping with the extreme conditions, new forms of life emerged in the oceans that would later form the basis for future ecosystems. But how did such massive changes occur in such a short period? Scientists believe that the cause was not only the change in climate, but also tectonic activity, which triggered powerful volcanic eruptions. These eruptions released enormous amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, further increasing the planet's temperature. Against this backdrop, one can speak of a true catastrophe that determined Earth's further evolution. And now imagine that as a result of all these changes, the first mammals began to appear on the horizon, which would later dominate the planet over millions of years. Imagine vast, lifeless expanses stretching across thousands of kilometers. These are the interior deserts that formed within the supercontinent Pangaea. They emerged as a result of the combination of climatic changes and geographical isolation, making these regions almost barren. In such conditions where rainfall was less than 200 millimeters per year, only the most resilient organisms could survive. But how did they adapt? Some plants, for example, developed deep root systems reaching 3 meters to reach underground water. Animals like the ancestors of lizards began to hunt mostly at night to avoid the scorching sunlight and conserve water in their bodies. Did you know that these deserts were home to giant insects the size of a modern sparrow? They took advantage of the high oxygen content in the atmosphere, which was around 30%, allowing them to reach such sizes. They crawled among the hard bark of ancient trees, some reaching heights of over 30 meters, creating real jungles in desert conditions. But that's not all. In these conditions, sand dunes began to form, reaching heights of up to 20 meters, creating unique landscapes. Meanwhile, temperatures could fluctuate from -20 to +40 degrees Celsius, creating extreme conditions for life. Now imagine how the ancestors of dinosaurs, who later became the dominant species on the planet, could survive in such deserts. Their instincts and adaptations were shaped by these challenges. And here's where it gets really fascinating. Although Pangaea existed for only a few million years, its impact on the climate and ecosystems of Earth is still felt today. Interior deserts became not only the birthplace of hardy species, but also the cradle of life capable of withstanding the harshest conditions. Did you know that it was here that the first mammals evolved, leaving their mark on history? Geographical changes that occurred during the Permian period served as a true catalyst for the evolution of life on Earth. Imagine vast continents merging into a single mass, known as Pangaea, covering almost the entire surface of the planet. This meant that the climate became significantly more diverse, ranging from tropical at the equator to cold at the edges of the continent. What is remarkable is that this diversity created conditions for the emergence of new ecosystems where life could adapt and diversify. For instance, in conditions of high humidity and heat, coniferous forests with trees up to 30 meters tall emerged, providing homes for numerous species. Did you know that during this period the first reptiles appeared, successfully competing with amphibians? These new creatures, the size of a cat, began to colonize new niches, hunting insects and other small organisms. But that's not all. Changes in sea level created extensive shallow waters, which became ideal places for the reproduction and growth of a wide variety of organisms. Now imagine that these waters were inhabited by giants like sea scorpions up to a meter long. They hunted fish with their sharp pincers and their size caused shock among modern biologists. And now comes the truly fascinating part. With the increase in oxygen in the atmosphere reaching 30%, there was a true boom in the evolution of insects. They began to grow to sizes that a modern person can only dream of, dragonflies with wingspans of up to 75 centimeters. How could such giants survive? The secret lay in their respiratory system, which could absorb more oxygen than that of modern species. And you won't believe this. It was during this period that the first primitive mammals began to appear, which later would occupy their place in history. Could life have been so diverse and rich? Of course, all this led to the emergence of new species that began to fill the ecosystems, but what caused their disappearance? The answer is shocking. Sudden climatic changes at the end of the Permian period led to mass extinctions, affecting up to 95% of all species. Can you imagine what this was like? It was a true catastrophe that changed the course of evolution forever. Amidst the flourishing of life, the ecosystems were becoming increasingly tense. Moisture began to disappear, and forests, once lush with greenery, started to gradually dry up. Imagine forests where every pine tree reached the height of a 10-story building began to die, and in their place emerged barren landscapes. With the increase in temperature to 35 degrees Celsius, the humidity dropped to critically low levels, creating conditions in which many species could not survive. And just as the ecosystem was on the brink of collapse, catastrophic changes began to occur in the atmosphere. The level of carbon dioxide skyrocketed to 70%, exacerbating the greenhouse effect. As you might guess, when there's more carbon dioxide than oxygen, life starts to suffocate. The oceans became acidic, which meant that marine organisms like corals and mollusks began to struggle with forming their calcium shells. At this time, when the land was already in danger, the seas also began to lose their biodiversity. It is known that during this time, more than 85% of all marine species went extinct. But that's not all. Internal waters also began to dry up, and rivers and lakes that were once teeming with life turned into dead zones. How could such changes happen so quickly? The answer lies in the powerful volcanic eruptions that were occurring at the time. These eruptions spewed tons of ash and gases into the atmosphere, blocking sunlight and causing sharp temperature fluctuations. But this was just the first wave of disasters. As a result of these catastrophic events, a process began that would later be known as the Permian mass extinction. At this time, Earth experienced the most massive extinction in history, affecting not only terrestrial, but also marine ecosystems. And it was not long before life on the planet would look completely different from before, with new species occupying the vacated niches. It is interesting to note that this catastrophe marked the beginning of a new era when entirely different creatures would emerge to dominate the planet for the next millions of years. Siberian traps represent one of the most dramatic chapters in Earth's history, about which legends still circulate. These colossal volcanic eruptions, which occurred on the territory of present-day Siberia, spewed enormous volumes of lava, ash, and toxic gases into the atmosphere. Imagine, the area of the eruptions was around 1 million square kilometers, comparable to the size of an entire country. The volcanic activity was so intense that in some places the thickness of the lava flow exceeded 3 kilometers. This was not just an eruption, but a genuine catastrophe that lasted for several million years. But that's not the most astonishing part. As a result of these processes, up to 30 billion tons of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases were released into the atmosphere. Did you know that the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere doubled compared to today? A genuine greenhouse catastrophe ensued, leading to a sharp rise in temperature. This created conditions in which many species went extinct, while others evolved at an incredible speed. Do you know that some studies suggest that the Siberian traps could have been the catalyst for the appearance of the first mammals? This was a time when life on Earth underwent the harshest selection, and only the most adapted species survived in these conditions. But, as strange as it may seem, it was after these catastrophic changes that the dominance of animals and plants began to fill new ecosystems. And here arises the question, how could such changes occur so quickly? The reason is that volcanic activity not only produced lava but also vast mineral deposits that enriched the soil, creating new conditions for plant growth. Moreover, new species emerged to replace the extinct forms, adapting to the changed conditions. The most shocking thing? Some studies show that during this period, the first ancestors of modern reptiles and even mammals appeared, which later dominated the planet. The time of the Siberian traps is not just about volcanic eruptions, it's an entire epoch that left a deep mark on Earth's history. And if you think that's all, wait. There's another astonishing discovery. Scientists have found that these events may have been linked to changes in ocean currents, which in turn could have influenced the climate of the entire planet. The Permian-Triassic extinction event, which was the greatest catastrophe in Earth's history, was indeed complex and multifaceted. Imagine that during this period, 97% of all marine species and 75% of terrestrial animals perished. How could this have happened? First and foremost, the primary culprits were massive volcanic eruptions in the region of modern-day Siberia, which were so powerful that they expelled 33 million cubic kilometers of lava and gases into the atmosphere. These eruptions led to a sharp increase in atmospheric carbon dioxide levels, which in turn caused global warming. The planet's temperature rose by 8 degrees Celsius. But that's not all. Changes in the chemical composition of the atmosphere made the oceans acidic, significantly impacting marine life. Do you know what the consequences were for ecosystems? Approximately 30% of all marine organisms were unable to adapt to the new conditions. And here's the most shocking part. In addition to volcanic activity, scientists suggest that the collision of Earth with a large meteorite may have exacerbated the situation, adding more dust and debris to the atmosphere. This led to a blockage of sunlight reaching the surface, causing a rapid cooling of the planet. But that's not all. Under stress, ecosystems began to collapse, and many species were unable to survive. Furthermore, these changes lasted for hundreds of thousands of years, making the recovery of life on the planet an incredibly complex process. Interestingly, after this catastrophe, many new species emerged on Earth, which eventually became the ancestors of modern mammals and birds. Scientists believe that this event paved the way for a new stage of evolution. Do you know that some researchers claim that this extinction could have been a harbinger of future climate-related catastrophes? The catastrophic extinction event that occurred at the end of the Permian period was one of the most devastating events in Earth's history. Up to 96% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrates disappeared from the planet. This was not just a mass extinction, but a full-blown ecological collapse that affected both fauna and flora. For instance, coral reefs, which once housed a multitude of marine organisms, almost disappeared, leaving behind vast oceanic deserts. Did you know that at this time, there were marine giants like plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs that hunted their smaller relatives, but even they couldn't survive the catastrophe? The state of the oceans became critical. Rapid changes in water temperature, poisoning by toxic substances, and oxygen depletion led to mass die-offs of marine animals. Now, imagine that the extinction of terrestrial vertebrates was no less dramatic. For example, predatory reptiles like dinosaurs were at the beginning of their evolutionary path, but even they faced threats. The direct ancestors of mammals, who could have become dominant, were also at risk in conditions where ecosystems were collapsing. If you thought the extinction of marine species was the most shocking, scientists discovered that the catastrophe also affected even small creatures like insects. At this time, the composition of the atmosphere changed so that the oxygen level dropped to a critical minimum, making survival almost impossible for most species. But that's not all. Researchers found evidence that this extinction did not happen instantaneously, but stretched over tens of thousands of years, further exacerbating the situation. For example, some species like ammonites fought for survival, but ultimately disappeared due to resource scarcity and environmental changes. And when it seemed that life on Earth was about to cease entirely, a new era began. You won't believe it, but it was during this time that the first mammals appeared, who would later become the ancestors of all modern animals. It's interesting that these small creatures managed to adapt to new conditions and survive in a world where everything else had perished. How did they do it? The secret lies in their ability to live nocturnally and their ability to feed on diverse food sources, giving them an advantage in conditions of resource scarcity. In the oceans, so-called dead zones emerged, where the oxygen level dropped to critically low values, and life in these waters practically ceased. These zones occupied vast areas, reaching up to 30% of oceanic waters, due to the mass decomposition of organic matter, which significantly increased oxygen consumption. Scientists calculated that as a result of this phenomenon, about 95% of all marine species went extinct. But this was not the most shocking. At the same time, acid rains fell on the Earth, forming due to the release of carbon dioxide and sulfur compounds into the atmosphere. These rains had a pH level below 5, making them more acidic than lemon juice, and they burned all the vegetation on the surface. Imagine how forests, once full of life, turned into barren lands where survival became impossible. Scientists found traces of these acid rains in layers of sedimentary rocks, where they discovered high concentrations of barium and sulfur, indicating catastrophic changes in the climate. At this time, ecosystems could not adapt to such rapid changes, and many species, such as trilobites and some types of corals, were wiped out in just a few decades. As a result of this ecological crisis in the oceans, conditions emerged where survival became possible only for the most resilient creatures. The ability to reproduce quickly and adapt became crucial for those who remained. But here's the most amazing thing. Some of the survivors, such as the ancestors of modern sharks, not only managed to survive, but also dominated the waters that were once teeming with life. These marine predators, with their highly developed senses, began to actively hunt their competitors, altering the balance in the ecosystems. The atmosphere, like ecosystems, underwent profound changes when a mass extinction swept across the planet, affecting more than 95% of all species. During this time, the oxygen content in the atmosphere dropped sharply to around 10%, while carbon dioxide rose to 30% of the total composition. Imagine breathing air with less oxygen than in modern conditions, while feeling carbon dioxide fill your lungs. These changes were caused by massive volcanic eruptions in a region known as the Siberian Traps. These volcanoes not only spewed lava, but also vast amounts of carbon dioxide and sulfur gases, creating a greenhouse effect and contributing to global warming. But that's not all. Such conditions led to the formation of toxic rains that scorched vegetation and destroyed numerous ecosystems. As oxygen levels continued to decline, large animals began to experience severe breathing difficulties. What's even more shocking? Some species that managed to survive, such as small mammals and reptiles, began to evolve in low oxygen conditions. These organisms started to adapt, and this laid the foundation for future ecosystems. Despite the catastrophic conditions, life on Earth began to find its way back, ultimately leading to the flourishing of dinosaurs. But if you think that's the end of the story, it gets even more interesting. A new player appeared in the atmosphere, carbon monoxide, which in turn facilitated the development of new forms of life, such as the first flowering plants. These plants would change the face of the planet and become the basis for the ecosystems we know today. The survival of species after the Permian-Triassic extinction was indeed a miracle of nature. Only a few dozen species managed to adapt to the new conditions. Imagine tiny mammals the size of a mouse carving their way through scorched lands where giant reptiles once reigned. They began to evolve in conditions with minimal competition, which gave them a chance to evolve into larger forms of life. What is most astonishing? These creatures evolved into the ancestors of future mammals, such as the first primates, which would appear millions of years later. Meanwhile, small reptiles began to occupy niches previously held by dinosaurs, eventually forming a new group of reptiles known as archosaurs. This process of adaptation happened rapidly. Within just a few million years, they became dominant in ecosystems. But that's not all. During this time, other remarkable organisms also appeared, such as the earliest ancient crocodiles, which had powerful jaws and could hunt larger prey. They became increasingly diverse, including forms that could move both on land and in water. Imagine a planet where a brutal struggle for survival was taking place, and at the same time, the ancestors of modern mammals and dinosaurs were developing. How did they coexist? The answer lies in their differences. Mammals remained small and nocturnal, while dinosaurs dominated the daytime. But you won't believe what wonders lay ahead. Among these mammals, some were able to develop into true giants, outpacing their reptilian competitors in evolution. Imagine larger forms that would hunt dinosaurs, and this would happen within just a few million years. But that's not all. The surviving mammals were able to develop warm-bloodedness, giving them a significant advantage in the struggle for survival. While dinosaurs faced climate changes, these mammals adapted to the new conditions, ultimately leading to the flourishing of an incredible diversity of life forms. Life on Earth continued to evolve, and on the horizon, new species were already emerging that would shape the planet's appearance for millions of years to come, including forms like bipedal mammals that would begin to conquer land and sky. The Permian-Triassic mass extinction was a catastrophe that claimed the lives of 95% of all species on the planet. Imagine that the Earth's ecosystems began to reboot like a computer, and new opportunities for life emerged in their place. The destruction of marine and terrestrial organisms opened doors for various groups of animals that had previously been in the shadow of larger and dominant species. For example, the first dinosaurs, which began to fill the gaps in ecosystems, were small but agile creatures that hunted insects and small invertebrates. These were the ancestors of modern lizards and snakes, which used their speed and ability to camouflage to avoid predators. But that's not all. The Triassic period was a time of experimentation with life forms. One of the most shocking creatures were the archosaurs, which evolved into large predators capable of hunting other mammals. Did you know that it was during this time that the first dinosaurs appeared, with sizes ranging from slightly over a meter to enormous creatures up to 20 meters long? These creatures began to dominate, using their sharp teeth and powerful limbs for hunting. Now imagine that at the same time there were also therapsids on Earth, which reached the size of modern crocodiles, but with more powerful jaws and a cunning hunting strategy. It's amazing, but it was in these conditions that the ancestors of the first mammals began to occupy new niches in the ecosystems. These mammals, although small, possessed unique adaptive abilities that allowed them to survive in harsh conditions. What's even more intriguing? During this time, the climate on the planet began to change, and temperatures started to fluctuate, creating unique conditions for the emergence of new ecosystems. Lush forests and diverse water bodies became homes for new groups of animals that previously had no chance of survival. For the first time, mammals the size of a cat appeared, using their intellectual abilities to find food and protect themselves from predators. Their brains began to increase in size, allowing for the development of more complex behaviors. And the most astonishing thing, through natural selection, mammals began to evolve into various groups, including those that would later dominate the planet. The change in climate and ecosystems created ideal conditions for the appearance of species that would define the appearance of Earth for many millions of years to come, among which were the ancestors of modern primates. The Permian-Triassic extinction event was a true catastrophe for Earth's ecosystems. Approximately 90% of all animal and plant species disappeared. This event opened the door for new forms of life that could fill the vacant niches. Reptiles, previously just one group among many animals, began to rapidly develop. What's most fascinating? At this time, the planet's climate changed, becoming drier and warmer, creating ideal conditions for the flourishing of reptiles. Their ancestors, small lizards, began to evolve into larger and more adapted forms. For instance, some grew to the size of modern crocodiles and started hunting the remaining animals. These reptiles not only survived but also became the dominant group on the planet. Imagine this. It was during this time that the first dinosaurs appeared, which millions of years later would become symbols of prehistoric Earth. Their sizes are astonishing. Some species reached lengths of up to 30 meters. But that's not all. In the Triassic period, several million years after the extinction, not only did dinosaurs emerge, but also other reptiles, such as the ancestors of modern mammals. They began to colonize new ecosystems, filling every available ecological niche. And at this time, the first known pterosaurs, flying reptiles with wingspans of up to 7 meters, appeared. These creatures conquered the skies, hunting small animals and insects, marking another step in the evolution of reptiles. But what's even more astonishing, some reptiles began to develop special adaptations, such as powerful limbs and sharp teeth, to cope with new challenges. This time was a true arena for nature's experiments, where the survival of the fittest led to the emergence of the most unusual forms of life. Reptiles that survived the post-apocalyptic conditions created a new diversity of species that forever changed the face of the planet. And in this new world, reptiles began to spread across all continents, leaving their mark on Earth's history. While giant pterosaurs dominated the planet, at the same time, on land, archosaurs began to evolve, a group of reptiles that would eventually become the foundation for all dinosaurs. These creatures were characterized by powerful limbs and a unique skull structure that allowed them to hunt prey the size of a modern deer. Archosaurs could reach lengths of up to 6 meters and weigh more than 1,000 kilograms. They occupied a wide range of ecological niches, from predators to herbivores, and it was this diversity that was their strength. What is even more astonishing? Archosaurs possessed a unique ability to survive in the most adverse conditions. They could adapt to changing climatic conditions. This allowed them access to resources when other species were going extinct. Some archosaurs developed lungs that were more efficient than those of their ancestors, enabling them to breathe cleaner air and reach larger sizes. Now imagine that during this same period, the Earth was covered in forests filled with giant ferns and conifers, where archosaurs could hide from predators and hunt their prey. These forests were true jungles, each tree reaching heights of up to 30 meters, with silence broken only by the rustling of millipedes as long as a baseball bat. But that's not the most peculiar thing. Archosaurs began to develop social behavior, forming packs for hunting and protection against predators. Their ability to work together was a true breakthrough in evolution. If you thought this group of reptiles was merely the precursors of dinosaurs, you're in for a surprise. Archosaurs became the basis for the appearance of the most diverse forms of life we know today. This time was a stage for the emergence of new species that would later dominate the planet. And in this world, where some archosaurs hunted others, the first dinosaurs began to form, which millions of years later would become the giants of their time. Picture these creatures, like the Triceratops with its 3 horns and massive shield, beginning to conquer their place in this complex ecosystem. Their sizes could reach 7 meters in length, and their weight could exceed a ton. These were true titans who not only survived but also thrived in conditions where other species were disappearing. After the catastrophic Permian-Triassic extinction, when up to 95% of all species disappeared, Earth faced a unique challenge: how to repopulate the emptied ecosystems. This was the beginning of a new era when the Triassic period became a stage for incredible biodiversity. Imagine a world where ecosystems once teeming with life began to slowly recover, and in this process, entirely new forms of existence emerged. The first steps towards ecosystem recovery were made by small but tenacious species that managed to adapt to the changed conditions. For instance, it was during this time that small mammals and their ancestors began to dominate, surviving in the shadow of giant reptiles. They were the size of modern mouse-like creatures and started to fill the niches left vacant by the extinction. But this was just the beginning. At this time, the first dinosaurs began to appear on Earth, including pterosaurs that could reach up to 3 meters in length and survive due to their agility and speed. Their ecosystems changed remarkably quickly. Lizards crawled through forests, and the first pterosaurs with wingspans of up to 1 meter soared through the skies. While some species continued to evolve, others faced new challenges, and their survival depended on their ability to adapt to the conditions. What is astonishing is that some of these early dinosaurs began to develop social structures, forming small herds that allowed them to hunt more effectively and defend themselves against predators. At the same time, the first herbivores appeared, such as the Dilophosaurus, which could reach up to 7 meters in length and was equipped with sharp teeth to cope with tough vegetation. But this is not all. Parallel to these processes, ecosystems began to be covered with vegetation that was twice as tall as what we see today. Imagine trees reaching heights of 30 meters, creating dense forests full of life and sound. These forests became homes for numerous insects, some of which grew to the size of a human fist. During this time, the diversity of life continued to grow, and each niche in the ecosystem was filled with its inhabitants. And what is even more astonishing, these new forms of life played a crucial role in shaping the modern biodiversity that we know today. Every day on the planet, incredible changes were taking place, and when we look at how all this developed, it becomes clear that nature always finds a way to recover, even after the most devastating catastrophes. These colossal plants, so powerful and diverse, formed the basis for the first terrestrial ecosystems, which in turn created ideal conditions for the emergence of new species. Imagine these enormous trees reaching heights of up to 30 meters, creating shade and humid microclimates that fostered the growth of diverse forms of life. In such conditions, the first herbivores evolved, feeding on vegetation and developing their bodies, increasing in size and adapting to new challenges. And here's where it gets truly extraordinary. Some of these herbivores grew to the size of modern rhinos. With their help, a new era began, where not only plants, but also large animals dominated the earth. What's even more astonishing, these dense forests were home to the first ancestors of reptiles, which slowly evolved into dinosaurs. Without these giant forms of life experimenting with size and shape, the subsequent era of reptiles would have been impossible. These ecosystems became true incubators for evolution, creating conditions where survival depended on adaptation and competition. Periodically, catastrophes occurred, but as history shows, they opened up new opportunities. The first major catastrophe, known as the Permian-Triassic extinction, wiped out nearly 95% of all species, but left those that could survive in the changed conditions. It was like a reset after which new forms of life began to dominate. Thus, in these new conditions, dinosaurs began to develop, soon taking their place in the ecosystem. Each of them, from the smallest to the largest, was a result of millions of years of evolution, completely transforming the appearance of the planet. And the most remarkable thing?